everyone and welcome back to Elevate Legal. My name is Maya and I've been part of the team behind this video series, which I hope you've been enjoying so far. In this expansion video, I'm going to take you through one of the topics in legal studies that a lot of students find difficult and as a result lose marks on when they attempt the exam at the end of the year. This area of study is the courts and vcat and the way that they resolve disputes. To help explain this topic, I'm going to go through a past question from an exam to make sure that we know how we can actually answer a question using the theory that we've learnt. I'll show you how to plan an answer, the best way to signpost to an examiner so that they can give you the maximum amount of marks possible, and provide you with the answer that I've written up for this question so that you can make sure you're making none of the mistakes that past students have made. Now, knowing our information about the courts and about vcat is one thing. That's really important. We have to know the information that we have been taught. But there is another element, and that element is actually being able to apply that information. To be able to apply the information, we need to know how it works. We need to know why it is the way it is, and we need to know how it relates to other areas or other concepts that we've learnt. We need to know the relationship between the information. That is where a lot of students lose marks, but it is also an area where the examiners really want to see you being able to show off your knowledge. So we're going to have a really good look at that today by looking at question 12 from the 2011 paper. And question 12 asked, compare the way courts and the Victorian Civil and Administrative Tribunal, or VCAT, operate to resolve disputes. In your answer, describe one dispute resolution method used by VCAT and or the courts. This question, we can see, if we scroll down, was worth 8 marks. So the very first thing we want to do with this question is we want to work out what is the verb in the question. And that, very simply, is compare. Compare is the verb that's going to tell us exactly how we answer the question. And we know from our verb glossary that compare requires us to describe and analyse how the concepts in the question, here the courts and VCAT, are similar and different. The next thing we want to do is highlight the keywords in the question. And those keywords here are courts, VCAT, and resolve disputes, because that's what we're comparing. And then last but not least, we also want to remember to include this element of the question. Describe one dispute resolution method. If we don't do that, there's no way we're going to get the full amount of marks. It's important, but we're going to have a look at how we actually do that correctly. Okay, we know what the question's asking. It wants us to compare the similarities and difference between the way disputes are resolved in the courts and in VCAT, and we know it's worth 8 marks. Now, 8 marks means you need to give 8 points of information, but the way I would suggest you do that is when you think about a difference, you're effectively giving 2 points of information, and the same with a similarity. The reason for that is when you're looking at a difference or a similarity, you're going to state what the difference or similarity is, then you're going to look at the court's approach, and then you're going to look at the approach of VCAT. That's 2 points of information, so it's worth 2 marks. So that's how I would do it. So we need to have 4 similarities or differences to make sure we answer this question properly. So let's have a little look at a plan. First things first, it's an 8-mark question. We need to have an introduction. It doesn't need to be long, it's simple and brief, but it's important. The second thing is we need to start thinking about those differences and similarities. Now, for the sake of ease, I would probably be doing 2 similarities and 2 differences. And my first similarity is that they use a variety of dispute resolution methods. The reason I've chosen that technique or that similarity there to use is because I want to include the description of one dispute resolution method. So in this part of my answer, in this paragraph, I'm also going to describe mediation because that's the dispute resolution method that I've chosen. Next, I'm going to do another similarity. I like to bunch mine together in similarities and then differences, and this similarity is the availability of appeals. Okay, fourth, I'm going to start with a difference, and that difference is the level of formality. Fifth, another difference, and that one I'm going to talk about the use of legal representatives. And lastly, a brief but important conclusion. Now, you could choose any similarities and any differences. I've chosen ones that I feel like I can write a full paragraph on. That's important to make sure that you're able to get the full amount of marks. That's the plan we're going to go with, and that's the plan I've used to write up my answer. Planning is really important for these long questions to make sure you're not forgetting things and make sure you're keeping a good structure. Otherwise, it's going to be hard for you to follow, hard for the examiner to follow, and hard for the examiner to give you marks. What I suggest you do now is go and have a read of the answer that I've linked you to. Once you've done that, come back to the video. We're going to go through it and see exactly how to answer this question correctly. Okay, so by now we should have read this answer. We're going to have a look at it. First thing you'll notice is that I have put this small, simple introduction here. I've basically said they're different, but there are some similarities, and they both use all these techniques to try and resolve disputes. Very simple. Then we can move on to this first paragraph, and this is about the varying methods of dispute resolution. I want to talk about what I've said first, though. I've said both the courts and vcat. That tells the reader, or here the marker, automatically that I'm talking about a similarity. And you can use this all throughout your answers to all different questions to make sure the examiner knows what you're talking about and knows where to look for marks. Here, the similarity I'm talking about is the variety of methods to resolve disputes. And I've signposted that my description is on mediation. And I've explained what mediation is. I've briefly stated the purpose, to encourage parties to come to a resolution themselves. And then I've stated that it is used in the courts and vcat, because if we look back to the question, it needed a resolution method used in courts, vcat, or both. That's my 2 points of marks there. Then we'll move down to the next paragraph. As is the case for disputes heard in court, parties to a case heard by vcat can still appeal the decision. We know straight away from that sentence again that I'm talking about a similarity, because I'm saying it's the same in court as it is in vcat. What I have done here, though, and I've gone into more depth because the first paragraph I also included that description, this paragraph required more depth. I've talked about how it's similar and also why it's similar. So not only are appeals available in both courts and vcat, we need to think about how they're both available. And we know that they're more available in courts. There are more avenues, more ways to appeal than there are in vcat. It's limited there so that costs are low and so there's finality. That is really important to talk about here, because you want to show that you understand why and you understand how. I've also made sure that I've differentiated between the approach of vcat and then here the approach of court to make sure that I'm getting both of the marks for the similarity. Then here I've moved on to a significant difference, again telling the reader exactly what I'm about to do, and here that is the level of formality. Now I've also said again why it's different and how it's different. How it is different is that the courts are more formal than vcat. Why it's different, there are strict rules of evidence and procedure in the courts which aren't occurring in vcat, and in vcat it's a much more welcoming and less intimidating environment. I've also talked about the greater impact, how high level of formality might increase equality, but a low level of formality makes parties much more comfortable and confident. Again, going into more depth like I did here. The other thing I've done here is said, on the other hand, again signposting to the examiner that I've brought in another example that is very different to the one I've discussed previously. Again, it just makes it easier for the examiner to give you those marks. Last paragraph here, vcat and the courts also differ in the use of legal representation. Again, signposting what I'm doing, that I'm talking about a difference. I've also explained again how and why this is a difference, using another nice signpost word conversely to show the inconsistencies between the two, and making sure I'm rounding out that discussion by talking about both the courts and vcat. Lastly, I've got this small conclusion basically saying there are some similarities, there are some differences, but ultimately both of the bodies will resolve different disputes in different ways, and as a result they have their strengths in which disputes they're best able to resolve. That is really all you need to do for a question like this. As we've said in these core episodes, you need to make sure that you're using full sentences, that you're paragraphing, that you're writing succinctly and clearly and getting straight to the point. But as long as you're doing that, you're accounting for your 8 points of marks, you should be on track. Thanks everyone for tuning in. This is all for today, but make sure you keep watching the core episodes to keep on track and come and find these expansion videos for a little bit more in-depth analysis. Thanks so much. I'm Maya, and this is Elevate Legal.